Hello folks, and a warm welcome. You're tuned in to my meditation, the Outdoors series. My name's Guy Cross, and I'll be introducing you to some interesting people with some interesting ways of using the outdoors to help sustain a healthy frame of mind. With being an outdoor lover myself, and using the outdoors to take care of my own mental health, I've always been curious as to how other people use outdoor hobbies and activities to take care of themselves, and that curiosity led me to the birth of this podcast series. My guests will talk about their favourite outdoor hobby, and we'll go into depth of how it helps them find peace of mind. Hopefully one of, if not many of the hobbies within this series will help you, or at the very least inspire you. And that's the whole aim of these podcasts, to fill you with ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of before, and to hear some positive, encouraging, real-life stories from my guests. Sometimes, hearing someone else's perspective on a hobby or activity gives you a fresh new way of looking at it, which can't be a bad thing, right? So without further ado, let's meet this week's guest. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the My Meditation podcast. So today I'm speaking to Susan Knapp, who was born and raised in Adelaide, South Australia. Susan finished university and moved to Kenya, where she found her first teaching job. She became a wife and a mother and lived through many adventures. Having then continued moving around the world, including living in Qatar, Malaysia and Rwanda for long periods of time, Susan gained 3 more children, another husband, and lots of fascinating stories. She's also the founder of social enterprise Ed to Africa in Kenya. So hello Susan, welcome to the show.
Hey Guy, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. It would be so much better if we could do this face to face in the same country, preferably Kenya, but maybe one day.
Well, let's hope for the future, eh? Let's hope for the future.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to explain how we met first. We actually met online, didn't we, doing an online course together?
We did, yeah, and it was quite random, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's kind of how we got chatting about kind of Africa and Kenya and travel and all sorts of stuff in it. I wanted to start up a social enterprise at the time, and you were doing something very similar at the time, so I was coming to you for advice and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I remember when you put your post up in the group and you were sort of a bit hesitant, thinking that the sort of group that we were in was perhaps one that you were not going to get that sort of alignment with. And I can still remember replying and saying, yeah, that's exactly what I do.
Yeah, I was so chuffed that you replied because, yeah, you're right. I wasn't expecting to kind of find someone so specific to what I was kind of trying to achieve at the time.
And it's really cool and a great example of why we should put it out there, because you just never know.
Yeah, exactly. If I hadn't put that up there, you wouldn't have replied and you wouldn't have known what I was trying to achieve.
Exactly, and we wouldn't be doing this podcast now.
Exactly. So just while we're touching on Kenya, and that's going to be a massive part of this podcast, I must say this podcast is probably going to be slightly different to most of the others due to our similar interests in a certain country and certain things in life. But do you want to start? Do you want to let the guests know about Ed to Africa, your social enterprise?
Sure. So Into Ed Africa is a social enterprise that I started in 2019, having spent a lot of my adult life living either in Kenya or living near Kenya and traveling back and forth. And Into Ed Africa is designed to be, we are an educational brand using a sustainability model where we don't actually buy into the charity mindset per se. We believe that that's a bit of an old school mentality that hasn't necessarily served both Africa and other countries. So we look more to a social enterprise model where we co-create and ideas and solutions and programs with people on the ground with the intention of creating purposeful enterprises that transform communities.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And this goes back to how we kind of met, really, isn't it? I was trying to achieve something very similar in a specific part of Kenya with people that I'd met, and that's kind of exactly what you'd done. And it's been a great success so far, isn't it? Do you want to let the guests kind of know what you've achieved so far as like the schools and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I guess on a really tangible level, we are still very small in terms of what we do and how we do it. The project started as a self-funded little venture that I started with my children. And what happened was, so we built two schools. So we started off by traveling to Kenya 3 times in 2019, and by the end of 2019, we had built two schools in resource poor communities in Kenya, one in a big slum in Nairobi and one on the outskirts, about 30 minutes outside of Nairobi, in a Maasai community. So we came out with these two very, very simple buildings, but with an enormous dream of creating some prosperity through these structures. And I was very aware that I wasn't going to be on the ground in Kenya. So what I really wanted to do was create amazing programs that were going to be a foundation for the transformation of communities. So it wasn't so much about the infrastructure of the building, it was more about the quality of the programming.
Yeah.
So we started off just with these two schools, and inside the schools, it's the resources and the equipment that we have is pretty much what you would find in many international schools. And then our schools opened in January of 2020, and then due to the pandemic, they closed in March. So schools remained closed for the whole year, and I was obviously then bound to being in Australia. My colleague who I work with on this project is in the UK, and no one could get in or out of Kenya. So we had to become really innovative, and it's ended up being a really huge blessing in disguise for us, because as restrictions eased, we activated a dance troupe where a group of children were able to come and learn dancing, drumming, fashion design, modelling, and that has evolved into a choir as well.
Wow.
So the children were they were getting these lessons every day in skills that they would never ever have learned or been exposed to had schools been opened and they were studying academically. So then that enterprise grew into another project that we started, where I decided that we could get the children in our dance troupe to become illustrators of storybooks. So we now have a collection, we're building up to a collection of 12 children's storybooks that have all been illustrated by the students in our school.
Wow.
And by selling those books, we have so many knock-on effects, and I guess it's because we're pretty cash strapped. We're really innovative. So
you're so innovative. That's what I was just about to say. That's what I was just about to say. I've been dying to say it for about 2 minutes within you talking there. What I love about you is just so innovative. You just come up with these ideas. If there's a problem, then you come up with a solution for something else.
Absolutely. And you know, Guy, I think that's one of the beautiful lessons you learn when you're working in resource poor communities in Africa. They are extremely resourceful, and they're very rarely a victim of circumstance. So when we adopt that ideology, so as a result of adopting that ideology, our children's storybooks, for books that we sell here in Australia, we've then created a little libraries program in Kenya whereby the children in Kenya who illustrated the book each receive a copy of their own book. So I've connected in with a printing company there in Nairobi, and it was extremely humbling. The first book that the children got delivered, there were 40 books that were delivered, and these are children who don't own anything, and they live without running water, without electricity, and then they receive this beautiful storybook that is illustrated by them. And I just got feedback from parents saying, you know, my daughter is sleeping with this book. She's carrying it everywhere. One of the children sent me a message saying, Susan, I could never believe that I could make something so beautiful. It's just a storybook with kids drawings in it, but there was so
Yeah.
much value addition. So we're building that up so that the children in Kenya each will have their own little home libraries, and obviously in Kenya they have a lot of kids, so siblings can read them. Parents can read them. But what we've also done, spilling onto our innovation, is we've also created an a very, very basic online literacy program where I now have a teacher here in Australia who connects in with those children in Kenya once a week for a 1 hour reading lesson where she teaches them. It started off with her teaching them reading through their own books that they had created.
Very nice. Very
It's so
nice.
cool. It's very cool. And so we have lots of innovative things, and ideally what we're now looking at doing is we've seen how amazing these projects are and how impactful they are, and now we'll be looking at ways to scale them.
Yeah, no, it's just amazing, and I just want you to touch on something else for the listeners as well, is the bags that you funded, that you got for the children.
Oh, yeah. So that was, yeah.
Do you want to tell them about that? Because I just think that is just an amazing story.
We do have, yeah, there's actually so many cool things. Like the desks that we use in our classrooms are made from 100% recycled wood, and they're actually made out of pallets. So again, we've connected into a social enterprise in Nairobi that does that. Our school bags are made from 100% recycled single-use plastic bags, and they have an embedded solar panel that connects onto a stand. So it means that when the children get home, they don't have electricity in their house at night, they can connect this panel that has been charging during the day to a stand, and then they can use that light to do their homework.
That's just amazing. And the reason I think I relate to it so much is because I've seen kids in that situation, when I've been to on my Kenyan trips. I can just thinking specifically of when I stayed with the Maasai. They had no power, they had no nothing, and they just had this tiny little solar panel on one of the huts, and then at the end of the day, everyone would kind of go to that hut to, use their kind of little phone or just to get a bit of light or something,
Yeah.
and so to have them bags for them kids to go home, to have them bags and to have a light, it just means so much to them, doesn't it? And even what you were saying before about the talking about with the books, of how they go home, they take their book to bed, and it just means so much to them, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Such simple things mean so much to them over there. That's what I'm trying to get at,
And and you're absolutely right, Guy. And it's so humbling when you're living in a Western culture, and we have so much to consume when you are with these kids who just have this absolute genuine joy from something as simple as a child's storybook or some solar lighting so that they can actually see it. Yeah. It gives you a lot of life balance.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going to places like that, visiting them and getting immersed in the culture. You've had way more experience there than I have, but even my little short trips there just opened my eyes and just filled me full of gratitude instantly,
Yeah,
It's hard not to, isn't it?
absolutely. It's so true. And I think I should probably mention that my three youngest children, who are 7, 11 and 17, they also run their own social enterprises, all of which feed into programs that we run in Kenya. So as an example, my 17-year-old daughter, who I adopted from Kenya, during COVID and when we'd activated the dance troupe, Aaliyah saw that some girls weren't always coming for class and she couldn't understand why. And she spoke to her auntie in Kenya, and that's when she actually found out about period poverty.
Right.
And where girls who don't have access to adequate sanitation products and a regular supply of sanitation products miss out on doing some really basic things like going to school or going to the dance lesson because they just have to sit and literally wait it out. So Aaliyah, who is now 17, created her own social enterprise, and she does public speaking events here in Adelaide, and people give her a little bit of money, and she has made 600 washable sanitary packs
Wow.
and distributed them. She's employed 4 ladies on the ground in Kenya. She has a menstrual health educator who distributes these packs to the girls. And that has just been so enormous for us, because each pack comes with some shields and liners, but it also comes with two pairs of underwear.
Yeah.
And some of these girls have actually never owned underwear.
Wow, it's crazy, isn't it? It's just
That's a
unbelievable.
real sort of deer in headlights moment when you get messages coming through saying thank you for giving us underwear, and again when you connect that into teenage girls who are walking to and from school, just that enormous vulnerability.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so Aaliyah is making a huge impact,
And she's
and
17, you say?
she's 17, yeah. She started this
Wow.
project in January of this year. So she started it when she was 16. And
Unbelievable.
she's really stepped outside of her comfort zone because she doesn't like public speaking very much. But she's spoken on radio shows. Today she also spoke on a podcast. Um,
Nice.
and it's been enormous because she is adopted from Kenya. She is very aware of the fact that she could have been one of these girls,
Yes. Yeah.
and she's leveraging the capacity that she has by virtue of being in Australia to be able to actually help girls who could have been her. So extremely humbling. Extremely
Unbelievable.
humbling. Yeah.
She's taken after her mother, that's for sure.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
Well, I tell you what, we could talk about this for ages, into Africa and all of that, into Ed Africa, sorry. I'm going to put all of the links to your stuff in the show notes. So if anyone that's listening wants to get involved or wants to check into Ed Africa out, then all the links will be there.
Yeah, fantastic. We love connecting with people from everywhere.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Well, I'm going to ask you now, just to start from the beginning, briefly, if you can, how your African quest began, how you ended up in Africa and specifically Kenya, and what was your kind of reasons for being there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think I've actually it's quite unusual for somebody who grew up the way that I did, very middle class, pretty average nuclear family, and growing up in Adelaide, and then ending up spending the last 25 years of my life sort of predominantly in Africa, but also in Asia and the Middle East. And I originally went to Kenya as a supervisor on a teenage exchange program, which was an Adelaide-based program. And when I got there, I literally landed and just knew I was home. So subsequently, I've literally never left, and I still really affiliate Kenya with being home. And I actually know, particularly in Nairobi, which is where I've lived, I know Nairobi better than a lot of Kenyans.
Yeah, sure.
So it's just a place that became really peaceful for me, and I get a bit anxious when I haven't been for a while.
Yeah.
It's like just this energy that you just need to replenish yourself with. Yeah.
Yeah, so you met a Kenyan, I guess, and formed a family and that kind of thing?
I did, yeah. So I'd always, ever since I was a kid, I had always wanted to, there were 3 things that I'd wanted to do. One was go to Africa, adopt an African baby girl, and braid my hair. So I've done all of those things multiple times. The husband wasn't really a part of it, but became a part of it. So I married my first husband, and we'd actually already decided to adopt our daughter, who we adopted when she was 2 months old, and she's now 24. And so it was funny because when we were going through the fostering process, and this was 25 years ago, things were still pretty conventional, and they said it would go through court if we were married and if we weren't
Hmm.
married, the adoption probably wouldn't go through court. So I still joke
Right.
about it, saying it was a shotgun wedding, because we had to get married in order to keep this child.
To
And
proceed, yeah.
absolutely, and even though the marriage didn't work out, it lasted a long time. We still got um, this amazing child.
Yes.
So, yeah, and then later when I was living in Qatar, my first adoption had gone so well that I decided I wanted to adopt again. And
Hmm.
so the same husband and I, we were then living in Qatar and decided to adopt our second daughter, who is the one I just mentioned, who works on the Period Poverty Project.
Yep.
And so, yeah, she's now 17. And then I have two other younger children who are not adopted and who are 11 and 7.
Cool. Is that your second? Was that your second marriage then, or was it the
Uh,
same marriage?
yeah, the first three children have the same father,
Uh huh.
and my youngest one has a separate father. Yeah, has a different father, and he is Rwandese, which sort of took me partly to Rwanda.
Right. Well, it's a good reason to go. It's a lovely country, also.
Yeah, it's funny. He'd never been there until I took him. I actually got a job there. And yeah, but I think in answer to your question, I recently, when I finally came back to Adelaide, I never ever thought I would come back. And when I came back and I'm sitting here, and it was just before COVID, and I really started doing some personal reflection and wondering, how on earth did this happen to me? How did I get to be in this, immersed in this African life
Yeah.
for all of my adult life? And I actually went for a past life healing,
Yeah.
and I'd never done anything like this before, and I was a bit broken, so was looking for different things. And I lay on this table, and the lady said to me that it took her a while for the energy to come through. And as I'm lying there, this lady who had never met me, had not had any conversation with me whatsoever, I'm lying on this table, and she starts reading my energy, and she says, "You were the female ruler of an African civilization."
Really.
And I was like,
Wow.
and I literally just started crying. And she said to me, "You, under your rule, there were a lot of atrocities, and you've carried this guilt with you through lifetimes. And so when you learn a little bit about that, of which I knew very little about, even of past life anything, but it was that I've come back in this lifetime to actually find that peace on a soul level by healing those wounds and those connections." And so that was kind of cool.
Wow, that's unreal, isn't it? It's crazy when
Yeah.
little things like that happen. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You found your answer for sure.
And you know what? And that answer actually gave me a lot of peace, because it was like none of my friends did anything like I've done. Just nothing, and it was really difficult to find that answer. And I thought, well, do you know what? Doing that healing, it actually gave me the answer. The answer gave me a lot of peace,
Yeah.
and I think it's also been a huge contributing factor to the work that we currently do in Africa and why we do it.
No, it all makes sense, doesn't it? And it really does make sense why you're so
Sure.
passionate about
Yeah,
Africa and
yeah,
Kenya, especially. No, that's
yeah,
amazing. So
absolutely.
we've kind of touched on some of the good qualities of Kenya and your life there and things like that. But you did kind of go through some dark times also, didn't you, with the breakdown of a marriage and things like that. Would you like to talk to the listeners a little bit about the darker times of your African
Sure.
experiences or worldly experiences? I can't just put you into Kenya, can I? Because you're kind of worldly. So
Yeah. I mean, there's been, I think when you live the sort of life that I live, there's been a lot of drama. There's been a lot of events and things that happen that many people perceive as just being sort of like they can't even relate to it. I'm in 1994, I think it was. Or no, 1997. I was in Nairobi and we were held hostage in a bank. There was lots of fracas going on and we were tear gassed. Um, and there's just been so many things. But I think, yeah,
Yeah.
both of the marriages broke down. I think it's really challenging to be in a relationship that is a cross-cultural relationship where people have different agendas, and again that makes it really difficult for the children. But don't get me wrong, I mean, I still both of my kids' fathers are in Australia, and their life journey is their journey.
Yep.
I think probably the biggest thing to touch on would be when I had been in Qatar. Probably the darkest point, and what I'll do, guys, I'll give you the darkest point, and then I'll actually flip that to how I created the light from it. The darkest point was I'd lost my job. I'd been working in Qatar for 10 years, and 50 people were retrenched. And because I had a loan in the country, and because of their labour laws, I wasn't able to get out. And I was held under country arrest for 12 months. And
Wow.
so what I had to do at this point was, well, my whole life just fell apart. But the catalyst was putting my three young children, who were 16, 10 and 5, on an airplane alone to Australia,
Wow.
not knowing when I was going to see them again. And as it happened, I didn't live with them again for 3 years.
Wow, really?
So that was really, really huge. And but
And
again,
within that 3 years, you didn't know what was going on. You didn't know when you were kind of going to see them next. And
well, yeah, no, I didn't. The rules sort of kept changing. So I got out of Qatar, and when I had a big court case in Qatar. When I finally got out, I took a job in Rwanda. And with my youngest daughter, we went to Rwanda, and then the plan had been that my other three children would come back and live with me in Rwanda. And their dad decided otherwise, and he decided that he would keep them in Australia, which, in hindsight, it was actually the best thing for them. And I really understood, even though it was very, very tragic for me to know I missed 3 years of birthdays and Christmases and everything, first day of school, all of those sorts of things. They were safe and they were being educated and they had good health care and all of that. But in flipping that, so that was actually probably one of my darkest times, in flipping that at the time that happened, and when I received the email from their dad saying they weren't going to come back to Rwanda, I was principal of this big international school, and everybody who I worked with had genocide in their history of this lifetime, including the father of my now youngest child. And on the day that I found out that my kids wouldn't be coming back, I had a meeting with my boss, and he said, Susan, some of the teachers here on our team, they never found their children after the genocide.
yeah,
And one teacher in particular who he mentioned had actually spent 1 year of her life just after the genocide walking around Rwanda looking for her children.
oh man,
And I thought that was an enormous perspective gatherer for me.
yeah,
And it wasn't that my children were lost, it was that they were where they needed to be at that point in time, and I was where I needed to be at that point in
yes,
time.
yeah,
And so when I got my head around that part of it, that's what brought the light.
yeah,
That's what actually brought the light. And Rwanda was a lesson of enormous perspective for me. And now, once my kids and we were reunited, we have so much gratitude for every single moment of every single day. And lots of parents don't have that.
yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? I know it sounds a little strange, but it sometimes takes the darkness to bring out the light, doesn't it?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
you have to go through a certain thing for you to not appreciate maybe, but to just be grateful, for what you've had and what you've got and what you've lost, but you've also gained back in this situation, haven't you? And that obviously is going to make you guys a lot closer than if that hadn't have happened, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before that, I was a working mum, I was a career mum, I was an expatriate, all of these sorts of things, and now I'm very, very present for my children. I'm very in the moment. We live through enormous amounts of gratitude, but also it was interesting again. You and my connection with Africa, Rwanda again was just this exquisite example of the power of possibility through healing. And so it's again, when you're talking of from the dark to the light, Rwanda went through the darkest of darkness in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And now it is this beacon of light. So again, it was fascinating from that energetic perspective. It was fascinating that my personal light and dark was going on with sort of this parallel life that I was having in Rwanda.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's a situation I guess most people, haven't found themselves in, of what you were just talking about there, with having your kids taken away from you, never knowing when you're going to see them, and you've just the way you deal with things, I find very impressive. Like, you're just such a strong person. You've gone through all of this stuff. I mean, you've told me other things, on phone calls we've had, and the amount of stuff you've kind of been through and where you are now. It's just so impressive. Like how you've kept going through all of that shit, basically, like all the stuff you've gone through and how you've kept focused, and the way your kids are now. I know you were talking about your daughter before, who's doing all of that stuff with Africa, but your little son, Marley, isn't it?
Marley, yeah.
I mean, he does little podcasts, and I don't know what else he does. He probably does other things, but all your kids seem to do loads of stuff, and you just get them involved in all of this amazing, productive stuff. It's just, I find it fascinating. I really do.
And well, I really take that as a compliment. And I think that what I decided when I came back to Australia and when I got reconnected with my kids, I actually decided the only thing that I, as a parent, needed from my children as they grew up was, not needed, but what I wanted from my children was that they had the capacity to be kind. That was all.
Yeah.
So I actually don't care if they don't know how to read. I don't care if they don't know how to write. I don't care if they don't know how to add. I think if you have this innate ability to be kind and to be compassionate, then you're set for life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of ingrained. Well, it seems like most of the people I met in Kenya and Africa in general anyway, that's exactly how it is. They're just, they don't have, well, a lot of them don't have anything really, do they? But they're just happy. They've got, I don't know, it's just their vibe, their whole outlook on life is so different to the Western world,
Yeah, they understand sufficiency. They understand that you don't actually need to have excesses in order to have a sense of peace.
Yeah.
Whereas it's quite a different ideology for us in the West. We sort of look to these external forces that we believe are going to create happiness and create peace, and actually they do just the opposite. I mean, somebody actually asked me today, they were asking me about my financial situation, and I know that we've talked about that my bankruptcy and there's so many stories that I won't go into now. But
yeah, sure.
The person actually said to me, because I told her how much money we live off per fortnight and what I do with it, and she said, "How do you do that?" And I said, "I'm very resourceful, and I understand sufficiency." And she said to me, "But do your children feel like they're missing out?" And I actually said no. And they don't miss out. They don't miss out, because what my children actually have, which I've learned and continue to learn, is actually quite a privilege. They have a mother who's present.
Yeah.
So they have a mother who has done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work on myself. I have done a lot of healing work. And going back to what you're saying about the kids is I'm very, very clear of what my purpose is. And so because I'm very clear on my purpose, I give my kids permission to be clear about theirs. And I think that's the essence of how we create peace within ourselves and others.
And without a shadow of a doubt, you've been influenced by the African way of life. The way they are, and you've kind of taken it back to Adelaide with you in a way. And you're kind of, I guess, living like you just said. The woman you were talking to is asking you if your kids are missing out. She clearly doesn't understand how you work your finances, how resourceful you are.
Yeah. And just you're right. And Africans, I think, there's so many beautiful lessons that I've learned from Africans, and I know from my first 10 years in Kenya, the lessons that I learned, the lessons that Kenya taught me was the difference between a want and a need.
Yeah.
And in Kenya, I remember I lived for a year without a fridge, and people go, "Oh my gosh, how did you do that?" Well, you actually learn.
Yeah.
A fridge is actually not a need. It's a want. And that's not to say that I don't have a fridge now, and I would always choose to have one, but I understand the difference between a need and a want. And that is such an enormous gift that you learn from Africa.
For sure. I mean, I've got a very short story I'll tell you about. I went down to the beach once in just outside of Mombasa, and the woman I was staying with at the time, she said, if you see any of the fishermen coming in their boats, just see if one of them's got an octopus for sale. I was like, okay, fair enough. So I go down to the beach, I check the beach out. Sure enough, a boat's coming in. I go over to the guy, I ask him if he has an octopus. He actually does, a small little octopus for sale. And I got chatting to him, and he spoke very good English. And he tells me that he only catches 3 fish per day. Once he's caught 3 fish, he'll go home. He'll keep 1 fish for the family, and then he'll sell 2 fish to the market. Now, in the Western world, look at all of them big trailer boats where they chuck loads of, just nets off the back of a boat. They catch as many fish as they can. They waste a lot of it. It's just amazing how the mentality is over there. They get what they want from the sea. All they need.
That is such a beautiful story. It's such a beautiful story, and it's just absolutely captured the essence.
It just never leaves my brain, really, that story,
I love that story so much.
He could have been out there for hours more. This was quite early in the morning. He'd only been out there, he said, about 2 hours, I think. He said, I've only been out there for a while. I've got what I've got now. That's all I need. So I've come home. I can spend the rest of the time with my family. I can eat, and I can make a little bit of money.
That's it.
That's it. That's all you need. And it goes to show the difference between that kind of lifestyle and a lot of the world, really. And that's where the problems lie, I think, is kind of greed and taking too much.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's actually that story that is a huge part of the reason why I started Into Ed Africa. And part of our mission is about transforming global landscapes, and it's actually about understanding that people in the West have as much, if not more, to learn from Africa than they have from us.
I couldn't agree more.
And that's why I'd said in the beginning, the charity model was very much connected to I have something that you need, which means I have more power than you, which means we are not equal. And whereas when we look at stories like that, that story actually is the essence of peace.
And that's, like you said then, I think we've got a lot more to learn from Africa than we have, than they can from us. I mean, unless you take yourself to these countries, though, no one really believes you when you say that, like I've been to Kenya, Uganda, Senegal especially as well. And it's just, I learned so much from them in ways of living, of how to survival, what, like you said, what's need and what's, just something you want. And after this year and a half of not being able to travel and go to places, I really feel like my education has gone less because I learn from these countries, and unless you take yourself to these places, you'll know this, it's very difficult to kind of explain to people how that works, isn't it? Because a lot of people would think Kenya, poor, poverty, all of this, which, you know, that's true enough, but there's so much to learn there as well. So much to learn.
And you know, yeah, and one of the sayings that I learnt, because I've only been back in Australia for 3 years, and I can't remember who said it, but it was some spiritual teacher, and it was, sometimes the poorest people only have money.
Exactly. You know, there's different wealths, isn't there? What do you call wealth? You know, most people see wealth as money.
Yes.
Rich. Are you rich?
Yes.
What do you mean by rich? You know, like, do you mean money or do you mean lifestyle? Because I prefer the richness of
And
lifestyle.
I feel like I'm the wealthiest person I know, even though I am financially not very wealthy at all. But I actually believe that I'm the wealthiest person I know because I have so much richness. And, you know, just to receive a message from the kids in Kenya, or the teachers on the ground in Kenya, with a smile and a piece of gratitude, that those sorts of things are actually really lacking in our Western cultures. And
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
yeah, and COVID has really highlighted it. We've become so much more insular, so much more selfish, and it's because we're fear driven.
Yep.
Whereas actually in Africa, they live for the moment, they live for the day, they
Yes.
enjoy the moment. And while that used to really frustrate us on many levels, actually now with COVID, we've went, well, actually, that's the only guarantee. So you may as well enjoy it while you got it.
And it's they kind of, I don't know if I'm saying this in the right way, but a lot of people in Africa are kind of in survival mode their whole life, aren't they? They're used to kind of
Yeah.
like struggling for things. They're not sure where the next meal is going to come from. So, you know, and us, if our supermarkets kind of got wiped out or something, we'd be absolutely screwed because we wouldn't have a clue of how to survive.
Absolutely.
Here, you know?
Well, look at the Australians and their toilet paper hoarding.
It was the
during
same.
COVID.
It was the same over here at the
Was-
beginning.
Oh, you guys were
Oh,
the
yeah.
same? It was so humiliating. The Africans were all just laughing at us, going, what's wrong with you people?
My girlfriend and I, we were in Sri Lanka at the time when it just started kicking off in the UK, and we came back to people hoarding toilet paper, and we were like, "What's going on here?" You know,
It's crazy.
But
But it was the embodiment of fear.
yeah, and
The embodiment
exactly,
of
and that's what
fear.
I'm trying to say about Africans. They're not very fearful people, are they? They're very strong. They're very.
No.
If something goes wrong,
Yeah.
they don't instantly panic and throw their dummy out of the mouth. They think, well, how can I fix this? You know what? They're instantly
Yes.
innovative, aren't they? You know.
Very innovative and when you do live in that present moment, I mean, that's the essence of Buddhism and yoga and all of that. And I think Africans actually have mastered it without necessarily even
Without
knowing.
even doing anything.
They live in that present. Yeah, they live in that present moment. And it's our judgments of the way that they live that it actually creates conflict with us, not conflict with them.
Absolutely, like. And what would you say is the biggest thing you learned from Africa or Kenya in particular?
The biggest thing that I've learnt, I think I would have to say, is compassion.
And I can see where you're coming from.
The biggest thing that I've learnt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I first moved to Kenya, I would be standing at my bus stop in the morning, and there would be kids living in the rubbish dump at the bus stop, and they were there with their little fire and what have you. And so as my life has gone on and as I've shaped it from that moment to now, I think, yeah, the greatest lesson I've learned is compassion.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. Compassion and gratitude, I think I'd add there as well. I just remember seeing some of the little kids, again, just flashbacks come into my brain as we're talking, you know, little kids with just a stick and a rubber tyre, just kind of wheeling it down the...
Oh, yeah.
Just wheeling it down.
Yeah.
And one kid even had an old tin, like a tin of beans or something, an old metal tin, and he'd created this kind of little thing that he could wheel along, and he just looked... The smile on his face just will never leave my mind, you know? I remember him just looking at me,
it's so
smiling,
beautiful.
and then
Yeah.
playing with it like, look what I've got, you know, as if to say, look what I've made for myself. And I was just thinking, wow, you know, like it was almost like a tearful moment where I thought, we're just so ungrateful sometimes back at home. You know, you can't help but feel like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for gratitude. You know, I think when you understand gratitude, it keeps you healthy. keeps you strong, it keeps you peaceful. We underestimate its power.
Absolutely. And that goes on to my next question, actually. Have you got a specific kind of personal story of gratitude? Like a moment where you've really just gone, wow, like, I mean, you're going to have many, I'm sure, after living in Africa for 25 years. I mean, I suppose I can be a little bit more specific, can't I? I've just visited a handful of times, and I just have these little moments that kind of just, like that one I've just mentioned then, it just made me feel so grateful. You know, I just saw this little kid with nothing, barefoot, just a pair of shorts on, dirty, you know, and he was just the happiest kid that I'd seen for a long time. And it was just, I couldn't help but just feel gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, like you, there's just so many examples of gratitude.
Yeah.
But if recently, when we were back in Kenya in the beginning of 2020, my daughter Aaliyah, I had taken some people from Adelaide with us, that we were a big group, and we went to the orphanage where I got Aaliyah from. And this will be a weird example of gratitude, but the orphanage is right down deep inside one of the ghettos in Nairobi, and it's run by Mother Teresa's nuns.
Okay.
And so my kids have always they always knew that they were adopted, and I always took them back to Kenya and went to the orphanages, and we really acknowledged that part of their lives. And we went to the orphanage, and we walked in, and we were greeted by this beautiful nun who just is like this angel. And she said, "Do you know what? We've changed our model, and we no longer take orphans. What we now do is we identify vulnerable pregnant women in the community, and we bring them in, and we take care of them while they're pregnant, and then we teach them about finance, and we set up microfinance for them so that they can then start their own businesses."
Wow.
And so what's happened is, since they've flipped this model of care, in 5 years they haven't had any orphans.
Really?
And yeah,
Wow,
and
that's so interesting.
That in itself, it's so amazing.
So they're basically teaching the women to take care of themselves and their child rather than put their child up for adoption.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is such a great way of it's like spinning it right round, isn't it?
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And, because, orphanages actually generate cash flow because of orphans.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. If you're running an orphanage, your business model is that you have orphans and you generate cash flow because of that. So for an orphanage to actually flip that around, it's really quite enormous. And it's a weird example of gratitude, because what they are doing is phenomenal. But had they done that throughout, Aaliyah would never have come to be part of my life.
Yes, of course. Very strange scenario, that, isn't it? How to look at that, it's kind of, you've gained a beautiful child through adoption.
Yeah, it's a really, really tough one.
But I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing that they're educating young women who have gotten themselves kind of in that situation, and they're helping them. That's brilliant.
It's amazing.
Brilliant,
It is absolutely amazing. And we met the mums, and we saw the babies, and we saw where they lived, and it's just phenomenal.
Unbelievable. Wow, we could talk forever, couldn't we? About Africa and just about travel and general worldly stuff, and just to touch on things before we kind of wrap this up. We were talking on the phone a little while ago, weren't we, about how we both kind of feel kind of being stuck in our own countries for such a long length of time, because we're both not used to it. We're both not used to that, are we? And I was telling you how I was kind of struggling. I have my girlfriend who lives overseas, so that's my kind of struggle at the moment. But I'm also missing, visiting such places as Kenya and just Africa in general. It's part of my lifestyle, and obviously it's the same for you as well, isn't it? You were going over to Kenya very regularly, and I'm guessing you're missing that hugely.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to do a lot of deep breathing and just trust in the process.
Well, you know what? I've just seen Kenya has gone that it's left the red list from the UK, so that's gone down a notch. So potentially,
Oh,
but there's potential
wow.
there. Yeah, I don't know. Everything's up and down right now at this moment in time when we're recording this, October 2021, in the UK. Things are just up and down with travel, and some countries are getting banned, then they're coming off, and then they're going back onto the banned list. So it's so frustrating right now. And like you're saying,
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
taking deep
In fact,
breaths.
it's just actually teaching us the life skill of being still,
Yeah,
which again, as Westerners, we're also not very good at that.
yeah. Especially for
So I've been practicing that a
yeah,
lot.
the same for me. I'm on the flipping it around. I guess I'm quite grateful for the time at home and spending more time in
Yeah,
my homeland.
yeah.
It's I have enjoyed it. I'm not saying I haven't enjoyed it, but I can definitely feel like the lack of feeling that I don't know how to explain it really. Like we were talking before about the learning things that you don't even realize you're learning stuff when you're away, but you're learning so many life skills and so many different ways of going about stuff rather than just the Western way of doing things, you know?
Well, and I think one of the other things that I've learned through being stuck here is I think that there's actually a different energy when you know what it's like when you just land in Kenya or land in
Yeah.
Africa and you just feel energized.
This is what I'm talking about. You've just put it way better than I did. That's what I mean.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's made me, I've had to really think about it because I think, okay, so I do feel that when I'm in Adelaide has given me an opportunity to do some healing and to be really still, but there's certainly a much lower, from my opinion, there's a lower frequency of energy
Yeah.
here in Australia than there is in Kenya.
And I must agree the same for the UK really, and that's not just because of COVID either. Like I've felt that before.
Yeah.
Like coming, like you say, when you're landing
Yeah.
somewhere like Kenya, we'll use that as an example. You just feel, like you said, instantly the vibe, the energy is just you can't help.
Instant.
Yeah,
Instant. Yeah, it is. It's instant. I think that's why they say when it gets in your blood, it just gets in your veins.
yeah, I think so.
And it is, but it is connected to that energy. There's just
Yeah.
something about it.
Yeah, and it's not just and coming back, I was just going to say before I kind of cut you off there, coming back to the UK, it's not the holiday blues that I get. It's not that I'm feeling down or like less energized because I'm coming home from a country. It's just in general. It's
Yeah,
it's just
so
in
true.
general. I'm not bringing my own country down here. It's fact really.
Yeah, agreed.
And
Yeah.
I don't think until you take yourself to these places and get out of your depth a little and immerse yourself in these other cultures, then you can never compare it really to what you're doing at home,
It's so true. It's so true. And it's a feeling like you just feel it.
Unbelievable. It's the same in Mexico, when I go to Mexico to visit my girlfriend there, the vibe is just, I don't know, it's just electric, like it's just a lot more alive and positive, and I think people just consume too much news and stuff here, and obviously the weather's not as great, which doesn't help here in the
true,
UK,
true.
and I can see how that can bring people down. But anyways, let's hope for brighter futures, eh? Let's hope for brighter futures. Let's get them borders open and
Absolutely.
let's get back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been great speaking, Susan. I keep saying that we could talk for hours, which we usually do, but we have to keep this short for the podcast. There's one section at the end. I call it Turn the Table, which is where the guest gets to ask me a question if they'd like. So I don't know if you'd have a question there that you'd like to ask me today.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you what piece of African wisdom you would share with me.
I've got a great one, actually.
I knew you would have.
It's very random.
That's okay.
Did you say African or Kenyan wisdom?
African.
Ah, good. Because this was in Senegal.
Okay.
So I was travelling with a guy in a car one evening. It was very dark. It was just below Dakar. Well, it was about 4 hours drive south of Dakar, so it was a very remote part of Senegal. this guy and I broke down in the car. It was so strange. Everything of the car just went off. The lights, the engine, everything just crashed in the car. I was like, no way, what's going on? So we were just on the edge of this dirt road, kind of trying to hail cars down. Eventually some guy stopped. He had a look at our car, and they were talking in Senegalese. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I asked the guy, I was saying, what's going on? And he said, he thinks he can try and start our car. He's going to try and start it with his battery. But he didn't have any jump leads, which are, the leads where you'd go from one battery to another. Yeah. So I was like, how's he going to do that when he's got no leads? So basically he took the battery from his car, he brought his battery over to the other car, so the batteries were right next to each other, and got 2 spanners, like metal spanners, and put the spanners from one battery to the other, and then boom, we started the car, off it went, started straight away. So he just used 2 little metal spanners to connect both batteries together, acting as like the jump leads, and then the car started straight up. He puts his battery back in his car, waves goodbye, off he goes. So there's my little bit of wisdom. If you've never got jump leads, then use a set of spanners.
And it's so much about the power of possibility.
And that's just innovative again, isn't it? It's just using your brain. It's like, I haven't got that, so what can I use?
Yeah, I love it. That's a great story.
That's the bit of wisdom from me to you today.
I love it. The power of possibility.
Oh, nice one, Susan. It's been a pleasure speaking to you once again. And thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. I've had such a good time.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you once again. And I wish you all the best with everything. I wish your kids all the best with their little ventures, Marley with his podcast, and your daughter with her little business, things going on. I've got nothing but praise for you guys.
Appreciate it. Right back at you.
Nice one, Susan. Okay, well, take care and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Guy.
Well, I absolutely loved that chat with Susan. It's not often that I meet someone with such passion and love for a country and continent that I also cherish and feel connected to. Her background, life stories, and everything she's been through deserves to be published as a book, I reckon. Every time I speak to Susan, she always has a different, inspirational story to tell. And as for the way she is with her children, well, I don't think I know anyone who does so much with their kids. She involves them in so many different activities. When you see her Facebook page, it's just full of productivity, fun, and just generally living a great life. And most of the time, that involves helping people. This woman has done so much good work for so many people, and I really do think she deserves a huge medal. I'll leave all of the links related to Susan in the show notes, so that you can see for yourself the amazing work she's doing over in Africa. It's definitely worth checking out. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you want to join us over on Facebook and Instagram, then search for My Meditation Podcast. I'll leave the links to both in the show notes, as well as the link to the official My Meditation Podcast channel, which you're more than welcome to subscribe to. The Facebook and Instagram page offer positive, inspiring and light-hearted quotes, photos and videos designed to bring a little happiness into your life. If you found any value from this podcast, I'd highly appreciate it if you could rate it and review it. And if you're feeling extra passionate, then please feel free to share it with the world and spread the word. It all helps the channel grow, which in turn means we can reach more people, which means helping more people. These podcasts are getting released every fortnight, so I hope you can join us for the next, and who knows, it could be about an interesting hobby or activity that could possibly be a life changer for you. Until then, take care and have fun, folks. Peace.